If you are ever near a deep water marsh and hear what sounds like a rusty farm gate swinging shut, look for a flash of bright gold and white. That is the yellow-headed blackbird, a strict wetland specialist that thrives in very specific deep water cattail habitats. Compare that to the familiar conch-clary call of the red-winged blackbird. They are adaptable, content nesting anywhere from brackish rice paddies to dry agricultural fields, boldly displaying their vibrant red shoulder patches. Outside the breeding season, these two distinct species gather into massive mixed flocks. They move like coordinated feeding fronts sweeping across the North American landscape. Because their nesting habits are so different, they face separate perils. The specialized yellow-headed blackbird is highly vulnerable to seasonal droughts that dry out their required marshlands. Meanwhile, the red-winged blackbird often clashes with human industry, as their flocks forage heavily in commercial sunflower and grain fields. Preventing their decline requires protecting the specific environments they rely on. Mapping the invisible continental corridors they use to move across the hemisphere is the first step in that process. This presents a unique challenge for biologists. It is difficult to draw a protective boundary around an animal whose life cycle spans thousands of miles, from Canada down through the American Southwest and into Mexico. Traditional conservation often focuses on protecting a single location, but a migratory bird requires an unbroken chain of healthy resting spots, each one spaced perfectly along a journey that can take weeks to complete. We often picture a migratory flyway as a single highway in the sky. In reality, it is a vast network of shifting flight paths that change based on weather, wind, and local food availability. Tracing those shifting paths across North America requires tracking millions of individual movements. That is a scale of data collection that professional scientific teams cannot achieve on their own. Mapping the actual paths of continental migration relies entirely on crowdsourced data and the active, on-the-ground involvement of the public. Today, researchers decode these massive movements using a combination of miniaturized tracking geolocators and massive public databases like eBird, which aggregate millions of human sightings. This animated diagram maps tracking data for red-winged blackbirds across North America, showing overlapping flight routes. Some don't migrate, while others travel up to 3,300 kilometers. In contrast, yellow-headed blackbirds enter a months-long migration period, staging in specific interior wetlands for extended periods. This high-fidelity view of the flyway is built directly by citizen scientists and community photographers who log wildlife observations in the field. When aggregated, this crowdsourced data acts as an early warning system, pinpointing exactly where critical survival corridors are breaking down. The tracking data shows that crucial stopover habitats are rapidly degrading along these continental routes. For the yellow-headed blackbird, the need is precise. They require deep water emergent marshes, weaving their nests into thick reeds directly above the water to keep their young safely out of reach of land-based predators. The spread of invasive, non-native plant species can choke out these natural waterways, replacing the native bulrushes and cattails that a colony needs to breed. When periods of drought strike, this ecological stress is compounded. The water levels drop, and what was once a deep biological refuge turns into a shallow, exposed landscape. A continent-wide decline in a migratory species rarely happens because of a single event. It happens through the quiet, localized collapse of these specific, unprotected wetland nodes. Once those failing nodes are identified, local community organizations use crowdsourced tracking data to target specific areas for physical restoration. Groups like Wildlife Parks Unlimited operate on a direct action framework. Their volunteer members move beyond simply observing the crisis to actively reconstructing the compromised habitats. This requires significant physical labor. Research teams identify invasive hotspots so that volunteers can remove them by hand, clearing the way to replant native bulrushes and rebuild the soil profile. The benefits of that labor cascade outward. Fixing a wetland to support migratory blackbirds inevitably revives the entire local food web. The clean water and thriving tree line seen here define a restored wetland and active, life-saving node on a massive continental highway. Keystone species, like beavers, move in and maintain these restored water networks, proving just how deeply interconnected the entire habitat really is. The survival of wide-ranging flyers like the red-winged and yellow-headed blackbirds depends on shifting our perspective, viewing our local wetlands as vital cogs in a hemisphere-wide machine. By volunteering to monitor local bird health and rebuild soil, everyday community members provide the physical labor needed to sustain North America's great migratory flyways.